everyone, and welcome to Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig, episode 118. I'm Reza.
And I'm Craig.
How are you, Craig?
Very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm feeling fine.
It's good to see you.
You too. Welcome to this episode, where we are going to talk about taking drugs and addiction. We're not advising you to take drugs. We're talking about useful vocabulary and expressions about drugs and addiction.
If you haven't heard this podcast before, we're going to help you increase your vocabulary, grow your grammar, and perfect your pronunciation. This week's episode, as Reza said, is speaking about drugs and addiction with vocabulary connected to that subject.
Yes. If you find my voice a little bit strange in this episode, a bit slow, you have to forgive me because I had a beer just before we recorded it. So, Craig, we're talking about drugs and addiction.
After drinking beer. We have some feedback before we look at drug vocabulary, and it's from Segundo Davila de Perú, who says, Soy un peruano que viaja mucho. Soy ingeniero. Todo el tiempo estoy estudiando inglés sin terminar. Actualmente me encuentro de viaje de trabajo en Marruecos. Oh, you've been there, haven't you?
I have, yeah.
He encontrado sus podcasts y me interesan mucho. Son muy prácticos. Well, thank you, Segundo. Mi nivel es casi intermedio. Favor sus recomendaciones. Yo creo que tiene que ser, por favor, sus recomendaciones para ver que me conviene adquirir de sus productos, pero para descargar y pago con tarjeta de crédito. Well, thank you. Segundo, we do have courses for sale. Now, these podcasts are all free. They always will be free, and you can find them at inglespodcast.com and, of course, on iTunes and other podcast players. But if you're interested in a specific course, you can go to mansioningles.com, where you will find a shop online, una tienda online, and we have specialized courses for the Cambridge FCE exam, for business English, for listening, etc. So if you go to mansioningles.com, we also have free general English courses there, but that's the place where you can find our paid courses and, of course, pay by credit card for direct download or for CD-ROM. So thank you for your question. And let's look at drugs and addiction.
Well, Craig, a very common expression is to be addicted to something. For example, if you take heroin, you're addicted to heroin. If you drink too much alcohol, you could say you're addicted to alcohol. Or if you smoke too much, you're addicted to tobacco. So you can be addicted to any substance.
And the noun is addiction. So you can have an addiction. The verb that collocates with addiction is have. So you can have an addiction to tobacco or to alcohol and have an addiction to drugs. And what do you call a person who has an addiction?
That person is an addict. That's the person, an addict. So you can be a drug addict or an addict of anything, really. Craig's an addict. He's already recognized his problem publicly. He's an addict of dark chocolate.
I'm a chocoholic.
He's a chocoholic.
The adjective of that is addictive, because chocolate, well, we'll speak about whether or not chocolate can be addictive. So you can speak about an addictive substance. So things like alcohol, heroin, cocaine, etc. are addictive substances. But before we continue, let's look at what addiction actually is. Reza, I think we have a quotation here from a website called Psychology Today. Would you like to read it? What exactly is addiction according to this website?
According to them, here's a definition. Addiction is a condition that results when a person ingests a substance, for example, alcohol, cocaine, nicotine, or engages in an activity, for example, gambling, sex, shopping, that can be pleasurable, but the continued use or act of which becomes compulsive and interferes with ordinary life responsibilities, such as work, relationships, or health. Users may not be aware that their behavior is out of control and causing problems for themselves and others.
Do you agree with that definition? One thing that I think is very true and how I see addiction is the bit you said about interfering with ordinary life responsibilities. For example, if you can't get up to go to work, or if you're arguing excessively with your partner because of something you're doing, if you can't keep promises to your family because of something that you're compulsively doing, then I think that's an addiction. Do you agree with that definition?
I do. I think it's pretty good because, like many people, I like a drink. I've been known to have a drink.
Just one?
Or two, or three even sometimes. But I wouldn't say it's ever really interfered with my life. So therefore, I don't consider myself an addict. Once it starts interfering with your life, for example, let's say you were so drunk that you couldn't go to work, or you had such a terrible hangover day after day after day that you had to cancel meetings, and then perhaps you could call yourself an addict when it interferes.
Exactly. I agree with that. Let's look at some vocabulary and maybe some definitions of words connected to addiction. If you decide deliberately to avoid any harmful behaviors like tobacco or alcohol or other more serious drugs, it's called abstinence. abstinence. The verb is to abstain, and the preposition from. So you abstain from doing something. For example, you abstain from drinking alcohol. You abstain from having sex. So it's very common for monks and priests to take a vow of abstinence where they do not have sex because of the religion.
Craig, is there a word for people like me who would like to be having more sex, but it just doesn't happen? So it's not my choice.
You mean like an anti-abstinence?
Well, there's not much sex happening right now, but I would like there to be, so it's not through my own wishes. Is there a word for that? Oh, I remember it. It's unlucky. I'm unlucky.
There are substances that cause psychological or physiological dependence. So you're dependent on certain substances mentally and physically, and those kind of things, those kind of drugs are addictive drugs. What's the difference, Reza, between psychological dependence and physiological dependence?
Well, psychological dependence is a condition in which a person believes that a drug is needed in order to feel good or function normally. That's what they believe.
So it's in their head, it's what they're thinking.
Basically.
It's not really physical.
Whereas physiological dependence is a condition in which the user has a chemical need for the drug. In other words, their body literally feels bad if they don't get that drug.
So it's, for example, if you stop smoking or you stop drinking, if you're a heavy drinker or a heavy smoker, you get this discomfort, these cravings. Think, your body really, really wants the nicotine, or it really, really needs the alcohol. That's called withdrawal, because your body withdraws inside. So it's nicotine withdrawal or alcohol withdrawal, and it can be quite distressing and quite painful.
Mm-hmm. Another common word is a stimulant. That's a drug that increases the action of the central nervous system, heart, and other organs. In other words, it stimulates action or activity in your body. It's a stimulant.
So examples of stimulants would be tobacco, alcohol, cocaine.
Coffee.
Coffee is a stimulant.
Caffeine, yeah. Caffeine's a stimulant.
Caffeine, definitely.
Yeah. And people do get addicted to coffee. They do, not only psychologically, but also physiologically. It happens.
And if you take too much alcoholic stimulation, you become intoxicated, which is another word for drunk. So, borracho, drunk, could also be called intoxication. And there are many words for being drunk, and they have different levels of drunkenness, don't they? For example, if you just drink maybe 1 or 2 glasses of wine, how would you describe a person who's only had 1 or 2 glasses?
So that person's tipsy. They're not very drunk, just a little bit tipsy.
You're feeling tipsy. You're feeling a bit lightheaded.
But if you've drunk a lot, then you could say that you're sloshed.
S-L-O-S-H-E-D. That's not very formal, is it?
No, but it's very common, but it's perhaps more colloquial. Perhaps sounding a little bit more vulgar, but it's very common, is pissed.
Yeah, that's very British English, isn't it? Because if you say I'm pissed or I feel pissed, British English speakers understand that as being drunk. But if an American speaker says they're pissed, it means they're angry.
Yes. In British English, we would say for that pissed off.
The phrasal verb.
Yeah, if you're pissed off in British English, that's what Americans mean by pissed, angry. But in British English, just simply pissed means drunk.
And it's very, very common to be pissed. But be careful where and with whom you use it, because it's not a polite word and you may cause offence if you say to somebody, you're pissed or I'm pissed. It's not very, very polite. Another word for intoxicated is stoned. S-T-O-N-E-D. I'm stoned. But I associate that, I connect that more with marijuana.
Yes, more
or
drug
hashish.
taking rather than alcohol. Yeah.
Although I think Americans would say stoned when they're drunk.
Yeah. High is another one. High is often associated with drug taking, to be high.
As high as a kite.
Yes, that's very good.
Como una cometa.
Yes. High. What you say in Spanish is colgado. High. We've also got plastered. That means very drunk. Hammered. Wasted. Can you think of any more, Craig?
All these words, by the way, on our website at inglespodcast.com/118. You can find these show notes there. Any more words? Well, there's an expression to be 3 sheets to the wind. And I suspect that's connected to sailing. I think it's maybe sails. What do you think? To be 3 sheets to the wind.
Probably does. It's not one I've heard a lot, but yeah, I know it exists. If you want to be very formal, you could say inebriated.
Inebriated. I-N-E-B-R-I-A-T-E-D. Inebriated. That's quite formal.
If you're so drunk that you barely know what you're doing or you don't know what you're doing, you could say that you are out of it or completely gone. Or if you're very pissed, you're as pissed as a fart, which is in Spanish, coger un pedo. Same expression.
Yeah, same expression.
Yeah.
There you go. But again, be careful where you use that. That is very, very informal, to be as pissed as a fart. When was the last time you were as pissed as a fart?
Oh, a long time ago. Yeah, Christmas.
Your birthday? Christmas. So obviously these have opposites. If you are not drunk or sloshed or stoned or plastered, then you are sober. S-O-B-E-R, which means you haven't drunk. You're completely straight, you could say, completely normal. Level-headed, you can also say.
And if someone is teetotal, Craig, what does that mean?
That means they do not drink alcohol. So they only drink tea, coffee, soft drinks that have no alcohol content. So if you want to say to someone that you don't drink alcohol, just say, I'm sorry, I'm teetotal. I'd rather not have any wine. I'm teetotal.
You'll find that many people who are teetotal are so because they used to drink too much.
Yep.
So in other words, they are on or off the wagon. Now, what does that mean?
That if they're on the wagon, they're not drinking. And if they're off the wagon, they're drinking. And according to the internet, that's an expression that comes from an 18th century expression, on the water wagon. There used to be wagons with horses going around the street with water, fresh water. And if you didn't want to drink alcohol, you got on the wagon to drink water. So you abstained from drinking alcohol. So if you say, I'm on the wagon, that means you're not drinking alcohol, usually temporarily. And it's also worth mentioning the noun of sober, which is sobriety, which is living without alcohol. So a life of sobriety is being totally teetotal.
Craig, what would be the noun to describe the process in which the body adjusts to functioning without alcohol or any drug, in fact?
That's when you go into detox or detoxification to get the toxins out of your system. Detox.
Yes, it's funny, earlier you said the word detox, the short form of it, a word which you will hear and read very often, particularly in reference to celebrities. They like to shorten it to say, this or that Hollywood star has gone into detox. It's very common to talk about Hollywood stars going into detoxification.
They often go to clinics, don't they, to pay money for detox. So they go to expensive clinics to purify their body and detoxify. Of course, when you're taking drugs and you're drinking, you often have a feeling of intense well-being or elation, which is called euphoria, which I think is similar in Spanish, euphoria, a feeling of euphoria when you take drugs.
Now, Craig, talking about drugs, not all drugs obviously are the same. They don't all have the same effect, and that's why some are considered more dangerous than others. How would you describe what they call a gateway drug?
A gateway drug is sometimes described as a softer drug that is often taken and then leads to a more serious, dangerous drug. So, for example, marijuana is often described as a gateway drug to heroin, cocaine, or something stronger. Do you believe that?
I think it can be true in some cases, but not necessarily. I know people who have smoked plenty of marijuana in their lives.
And they've never taken heroin?
Never taken anything else, so not necessarily. But then there are cases of people who start off with softer drugs, like, let's say, marijuana or something like that, and move on to harder drugs because they want to feel more of an effect. There are some cases, but I don't think it's necessarily true.
I think it often has to go together with some kind of background of maybe an unhappy family life or some sort of desire to escape reality. So if you try escaping reality with alcohol or softer drugs, then you want to escape even more. So you go on to more escapism, harder drugs, and then it becomes a vicious circle. But I don't think it's necessarily true. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean to say if you're taking soft drugs, it's going to lead to harder drugs. Reza, if you take too much of a drug, which can cause death in some cases, what's the expression? What's the word for that?
Overdose. So it can be a verb or a noun, to overdose or to suffer an overdose. So sobredosis in Spanish.
And sometimes if you stop suddenly, if your body is used to taking drugs and you suffer some reaction from when you stop taking it, what's that called?
Well, the most neutral word is withdrawal. But there's also an expression called cold turkey, which is a more colloquial expression, which describes the extreme discomfort of withdrawal symptoms. Cold turkey. In Spanish, is it el mono or la mona? I can't remember. El mono, I think.
El mono, yeah.
El mono is cold turkey. So mono, you say monkey, but in English we say cold turkey.
We say turkey.
That's curious.
But it's cold turkey because I think the skin goes like a turkey's skin. It's like cold and clammy and humid. Yeah.
Craig, have you ever been hungover? Have you ever had a hangover?
Oh, yes. I used to have many, many hangovers in my formative years. If you drink too much, your body dehydrates. If you drink too much alcohol, the next day you have a very unpleasant feeling, and that's a hangover. Or you can be hungover. Una resaca.
Some people have a theory about what to do when you're hungover. Probably not a good idea. They talk of hair of the dog. What is that, Craig?
Hair of the dog is a small shot of alcohol that you had the night before. So it's the same thing that made you feel sick and ill in the first place, but you have another dose, another drink to try and help you recover from the hangover. I've tried it once or twice. I don't think it works.
No, I don't believe
I think the best thing's water and rest.
Yeah.
Maybe a McDonald's. Let's speak about some common drugs that can be found and let you know the English expressions for them. Obviously, heroin we've mentioned, and cocaine, and there's crack cocaine and speed.
Speed means amphetamines. You might not be familiar with the term speed, but I'm sure you know about amphetaminas, no?
Yeah.
If someone says E or E's, what are they talking about?
Ecstasy, which doesn't seem to be so popular these days. Not that I would know, but I haven't heard many people speaking about ecstasy since the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
I don't know what the drug of choice is these days in nightclubs and parties, but I don't think it's ecstasy so much.
And what about acid? What's that known as?
LSD. Yeah, very popular in the 60s and 70s. Again, I haven't heard... maybe it's my age, but I haven't heard many people speaking about acid and LSD. Magic mushrooms used to be popular as well when I was growing up.
Yeah, mushrooms which have a strange effect on your mind.
Hallucinogenic mushrooms, yeah.
So if you take magic mushrooms or acid, it's typical to talk about to go on a trip. Used to talk about people going on a trip. So they didn't actually go to any place. They just traveled in their mind. So the idea was if you take acid or magic mushrooms, your mind goes to very strange places. So it's to go or to be on a trip.
There are many expressions for marijuana in spoken English. There's a doobie, D-O-O-B-I-E, a doobie, or a joint. Can you think of any others?
Also a spliff.
S-P-L-I-F-F.
So this is whenever you put marijuana, cannabis, into tobacco and make your own special cigarette, let's call it.
So marijuana is also known in slang as grass, or weed, or dope.
Or cannabis is the more for the name of the plant, I guess, in general.
Yeah.
By the way, thanks to the Spanish for giving us marijuana. I don't mean the actual substance. I mean the word, because it's Maria Juana. That's how it's got into English. So I imagine it got in via South America, and Maria Juana became marijuana in English.
Have you ever seen marijuana plants growing wild?
I have, yes.
Where were you?
In Spain, I've seen them grow wild.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I say seen them grow wild, but they didn't. They seem to be in a public place, but it's possible that somebody planted them and just left them. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I was walking around years ago in the north of India, near the Kulu Valley, and I was walking along the side of the road for miles, not noticing what was growing in the fields on either side of the road. And suddenly I looked more closely, and as far as I could see, there were marijuana plants as higher than me, taller than me, probably about 6 feet high, everywhere. It's just an incredible. I could not believe the amount of marijuana that was growing in that field.
And was anybody collecting them, cultivating them?
Not while I was there. I mean, there was quite a bit about in the village at night, but I couldn't see anybody actually working the fields and harvesting or anything, no. But it definitely was an area in which you could easily find marijuana.
Now, Craig, what kind of drug would you call marijuana? An upper or a downer?
I think it's a downer, isn't it? I think it it's very mellowing, which means it relaxes you. It makes you feel very laid back and comfortable. Uppers...
cocaine, amphetamine,
exactly. Yeah,
give you energy, make you more energetic,
make the metabolism work faster.
Right,
give you more energy. Exactly.
So you have uppers and you have downers.
What about alcohol? Is that an upper or downer? It's an upper when you first.
It's kind of both, isn't it? Alcohol's strange. It can have both effects. It can be an upper or a downer. At the beginning, it's an upper. Drink too much and it's a downer.
Yeah. Alcohol slang words include booze, B-O-O-Z-E. Booze is slang for alcohol. Sauce in some parts. What would you?
If you say, for example, oh, tonight he's on the sauce.
Yeah,
he's drinking.
he's on the booze.
Yeah.
What would you say in Belfast for alcohol if you wanted to use a slang word?
Above all, booze. Also on the sauce, or some people say hooch.
Yep.
Hooch.
Or grog, G-R-O-G.
I believe grog is very popular in Australia. It's
Yep.
extremely popular there. Also, a tipple.
Mhm.
Yeah. With a, for example, oh, I'll have a tipple. A nice way of saying I'll have a drink.
Can you think of any slang words for tobacco?
Yes, in Britain, people often say backy.
Backy, B-A-C-C-Y. What about cigarettes?
So, backy for tobacco, and the actual cigarettes are cigs or ciggies, tabs. or
Tabs is new for me.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think that might be a Belfast word.
Yeah, it might be. It might be. And what about fags?
Fags is common, yeah. But be careful with fags because although fags is a common slang word for cigarettes in the UK, it does mean homosexual in a nasty way in the US.
Right.
So it's a derogatory term, a negative term for homosexual in the US. And it sometimes can be confusing. Of course, if you take too much, if you drink too much alcohol, if you take too many drugs, then you are abusing the substance. So that's substance abuse. And sometimes it can be a problem if you don't recognize the fact that you are drinking too much or smoking too much, whatever. You can be in denial, which means you're denying the fact that you're abusing substances. So the expression to be in denial means to say, no, I don't have a problem. That's no problem for me. I can stop drinking tomorrow. So people can be in denial.
Very often, a drug addict or a junkie is in denial. They don't like to recognize the fact that they have a substance abuse problem. We say junkie. In Spanish, you also have the word, but it comes from English, from the idea of someone who takes what we call junk. Junk is a slang word for strong drugs, particularly heroin. So if you take that junk, you're a junkie. That's where it comes from. Junk means rubbish. So it's a recognition of that the substance is rubbish. It's like taking rubbish. The person who sells that drug to the junkie is the dealer or the pusher. They deal drugs or they push drugs.
And if you inject drugs into your veins, into your body, the phrasal verb is to shoot up. So to shoot up with heroin or to shoot up with a drug.
There's another expression, Craig, to chase the dragon. That's another form of taking drugs. What does that refer to?
That's smoking it, where smoking heroin when you heat it and smoke and you burn it, smoke comes up and you inhale, you take the smoke in. It's very common with crack cocaine, which is very, very addictive.
Mm-hmm. And apart from smoking and drinking drugs, of course, the other way is to pop pills. If you pop pills, means you're taking drugs in the form of a pill, a tablet, like E, for example, illegally, to pop pills.
So it means to take pills. Then if you're a pill popper, then you're taking pills. I'm
not much of a pill popper. People think of me more as a party pooper. A party pooper, that's P-O-O. P-E-R is aguafiestas, the person who ruins the party. So I'm not a pill popper, I'm a party pooper.
Try saying that after 2 Guinnesses. We'd like to, at this point, thank our sponsors, italki, for supporting us with this podcast. If you're interested in having a one-to-one teacher to improve your English, Reza and I recommend italki. On their webpage, you'll find many, many native international language teachers who are only too happy to connect with you over Skype to help you improve all aspects of your English. It's an affordable service. It's very convenient because you study when you have time. And both of us, Reza and I, have both tried it. I've tried it with Spanish. Reza's experimented with French. We were both very happy with their service. And for that reason, we're recommending you to try it if you want a private teacher. To find out more, go to inglespodcast.com/italki, where you will be able to get a free lesson for signing up on our website. We'd like to say thank you to italki for sponsoring Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig. Reza, do you think some drugs should be made legal? Do you think some drugs that are currently illegal should be made legal?
I think all drugs should be made legal.
Really? That's quite
Heroin,
controversial.
Crack, cocaine, meth, you name it. I think it should be all legal. But you know what? I wouldn't take any of them myself. I have no interest.
How do you think that would benefit society if everything was if you could go to the corner shop and buy a packet of cigarettes and some heroin?
Well, let me explain first. I think taking crack or heroin is incredibly stupid, and it doesn't appeal to me in the least. I've never done it. But I think it should be legal because of the crime involved in the obtaining and dealing of it. That's the only thing that interests me. Personally, I believe that if somebody really wants to take heroin or crack or speed, they are going to do it and nothing will really stop them. So, because they're illegal, they often commit crimes to be able to take those drugs. And of course, then people commit crimes to be able to deal them the drugs. So if it were made legal, then my theory is that illegal criminality would disappear. That's what interests me in making drugs legal. What about you?
I agree with you up to a point, but what concerns me is where sometimes you get 14, 15-year-olds going into a bar and maybe ordering a beer or getting cigarettes, then it's possible that underage children would have easier access to strong, hardcore drugs.
Well, I would strictly control it. I would make it available only, for example, in certain state-run businesses. So you would have to have a prescription or something like that, although anybody should be allowed to get one, and go to a state-run building where it's a fixed price. So no one can charge you more or less and buy the substance, and that's it. The government could even make some money from it because they could tax it.
So I'm guessing you are not in favor of making alcohol or tobacco illegal. Was
prohibition in the United States not one of the most catastrophic ideas they've ever had? And the American government has had a lot of catastrophic ideas, like invading Iraq and things like that. But prohibition is truly one of the worst. It was the best thing that ever happened for the American mafia. Prohibition. They couldn't believe their luck. It created a world of opportunities for them. When they realized that 5, 6, 10 years later, they made alcohol legal again. It was a complete waste of time and merely established the mafia in America. Everybody knows that. I don't think anybody denies that these days. It's pretty much accepted as a fact, no?
I've got to say, I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right. And thinking about it, it would be a good idea, I think, to make all drugs legal. Everything. Soft drugs and hard drugs.
It's curious that in some countries, certain drugs are illegal and they're considered totally normal and part of the culture in other countries. Alcohol, above all. In many Muslim countries, many Islamic countries, alcohol is illegal. It cannot be obtained legally. That's curious for someone who lives in a country like Spain, let's say, where, you know, it's very common, a little bit of dry, un vinito tinto con la comida. Could there be anything more normal and daily than that? Yet it's unthinkable in Saudi Arabia. Curious, isn't it?
But many rich Saudis and many rich Muslims in countries that have banned alcohol just go to tourist hotels and drink in the bar. I've seen many local businessmen drinking in the bar because they can't buy it anywhere else. So you can still get it. It just means it's more expensive and more difficult to get, to find.
Yeah, so it just seems so hypocritical to ban it. What about tobacco? What are your views on tobacco and cigarettes?
Well, it's noticeably the rise in tobacco consumption is happening in lesser developed countries. So you're seeing many more Indians and Southeast Asians and poorer countries, unfortunately, getting addicted to it. Whereas in the West, where now the shift is to be healthier and take more care of yourself and look after your body, tobacco companies are really finding it hard to make any money, to make a profit, because people are realizing how bad cigarettes are for you.
Yeah. About 5 or 10 years ago, it was hard to find a Chinese man who didn't smoke.
Right.
Virtually all Chinese adult males until recently smoked, it seemed.
Seems to be a rite of passage. It seems like if you're not smoking, you're not really a man. Yeah. And I've noticed that in the drinking culture in Asia as well, that there's this pressure, this peer pressure and social pressure from bosses, from work colleagues, that you must drink a lot when you go out socially, when you have business lunches and business dinners. It's not accepted to abstain from alcohol. You have to drink and get drunk. Heavily with your colleagues and your bosses.
Well, many years ago in Ireland, people used to say, a long time ago perhaps, but people used to say, don't trust a man who never drinks.
I heard that, yeah. I've heard that.
And now that's a very Irish thing. We're not talking about Asia, because in Ireland, alcohol is often abused by many people. They drink a bit too much. It forms an important part of the culture. And people were, in the past, not so much now perhaps, they used to be a bit suspicious of people who didn't drink. The thinking was, well, why isn't he drinking? What's he trying to hide? Why won't he drink? Is he afraid of what he might say if he has too much to drink? I think that was the philosophy behind it.
Is it still true?
In some cases, I think it is. I think many people are suspicious of someone who never drinks in Ireland. They might not say it, but they are a bit. It's fair enough, someone who doesn't drink on certain occasions because they're driving or they don't feel like it. But someone who's a teetotaler does tend to raise suspicions in Ireland. Yeah, it's true.
Do you think sugar is addictive?
I believe it's been proven that it is. I don't know the full science behind it, but apparently it does things to your brain, which means that you do become addicted to it.
What about tea, coffee, and chocolate?
Oh, well, chocolate, Craig, I think you know a lot more about that than me.
Again, it's the sugar, isn't it? The sugar in chocolate's probably the addictive substance.
But you prefer dark chocolate more, which has less sugar in it.
Yeah, but when you eat the quantities I eat, that's still a lot of sugar. Mm-hmm. What about tea and coffee? You can get addicted to that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they've proven that you can. Yeah.
What other things can people get addicted to?
Work.
Sex.
Yep.
Video games, computer games.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's a serious problem.
Shopping.
Mm-hmm.
What do you call someone who's addicted to work?
A workaholic.
And addicted to shopping?
A shopaholic.
And to sex?
A sex maniac.
Sex maniac, yeah. I've heard sexaholic as well, but yeah, and also sex maniac, yeah. Do you know anyone in any of those categories?
I've known a couple of workaholics. I've got a friend who likes sex a lot.
Are you talking about me?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm talking about somebody who changes sexual partners on not a monthly basis, but very, very regularly. And who has experimented to the degree that I would not experiment.
I'm not sure what to say. I was going to say there's a term for such fellows. They're called lucky men, aren't they? They're called very lucky.
Well,
I envy them.
I'm not sure how lucky because this particular person is quite lonely, really.
Okay.
So I'm not very envious.
Craig, what about different types of alcoholic drinks? We often talk about their proof or the percentage of alcohol in them. Which is the strongest between beer, wine, and whiskey?
Whiskey, which is commonly, is it 40% proof?
Usually about 40, yeah.
Is that right?
What about wine?
Wine, I'm guessing 14%, 15%.
That would be a fairly strong wine,
Is
but
that
it could be
too strong?
12's about the average,
Okay.
yeah. But it could be 14, 15. And beer?
Beer, anything from 3.8, 4% up to 7.5%, the stronger ones.
Yeah.
Around about 5%.
And of course, these days you can get non-alcoholic beers.
I think Spain drinks more non-alcoholic beer than any other European country.
Well, now I could believe that because I've seen a lot of people drinking it here, yeah.
It's very, very common.
It's something I virtually never buy. I don't really find it appeals to me. I either like a beer with alcohol or something that isn't beer without alcohol myself.
I totally understand that. Do you think some people have addictive personalities? Do you think there are people who really should stay away from addictive substances because they get easily addicted to them, whereas other people maybe can control themselves more?
I think so, yeah. Because if you ever look at documentaries or TV programs or read about junkies who are addicted to hard drugs, very often they're also addicted to, for example, tobacco, alcohol, gambling, as well as heroin, cocaine, where they often go together. Very, very often. Yeah. So I do think some people have addictive personalities.
I think that's true. I agree with you.
Craig, you've identified and recognized your addiction, but can you ever truly stay off? Can you abstain from dark chocolate?
I don't think so. I've given up smoking. I've given up drinking. What's left?
Sex?
Coffee and maybe coffee and dark chocolate.
Yes.
And maybe a little bit of sex.
A fellow has to have some pleasures in life, yes?
Yeah. If you give up everything, you don't live longer. It just feels like it.
Or you might live longer, but you'll live longer in a very sad way.
Exactly. Exactly. It just feels like you're living longer. Anyway.
Craig, can I ask the listeners one final question?
Go ahead.
About our discussion. Listeners, are Aprender con Resi Craig podcasts addictive? We hope so. And if so, we are unashamed dealers.
And we're happy to feed your addiction with more podcasts. However, we do need your ideas and suggestions for future episodes. So please get in touch, connect with us, tell us what you think about our podcasts and what you would like to hear from us in the future. You can leave your voice messages at speakpipe.com/inglespodcast, or you could send us an email with a comment or question to me, Craig, at inglespodcast.com.
Or to me, Reza at belfastreza@gmail.com. And please try to get some of your friends hooked on us as well. Enganchados.
Hooked. To be hooked on podcasts. We're definitely hooked on podcasting. If you're interested in joining our wonderful sponsors for more detailed show notes, go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Ingles podcast. And we'd like to take this opportunity to thank our wonderful sponsors who are Lara, Thara, Mamin, Juan, Sara, Cory, Jorge, Raul, Rafael, Danielle, and Manuel. Thank you very much for your continued support. On next week's podcast, Reza, what's the subject?
Getting dressed and undressed. And we should add very quickly that there will be no accompanying video.
But there might be some audio zipping, unzipping, buttoning and buttoning.
But no video. You'll have to use your imagination.
So if you'd like to join us next week for a deep dive and examination of getting dressed and undressed, please join us next episode. In the meantime, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Have a wonderful week. music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.